Alright, so now we will look at chapter 12 of Matthew, verse 1 to 14. And I asked you guys to read through all three sections and find out some similarities or some details, right? So let's discuss that. So we are now in chapter 12 of Matthew and in chapter 2 of Mark, verse 23 to 27 or 28, and then Luke 6. Okay. So when we look at these three passages, when you look at these three passages, what's the day in which this happens? This is the Sabbath. Okay. Now, see, before that, chapter 2 verse 23 to 28 of Mark and 3 verse 1 to 6. Yeah. So we have two incidents actually here. One is the food incident and the one in the synagogue. Okay. Now, look at this. Matthew 12 verse 1 to 8 is happening on the Sabbath. And then after that, the next incident is inside the synagogue. Correct? Matthew 12 verse 1 to 8 and then 9 onwards. But if you look at Luke 6, these two incidents are recorded as happening on two different Sabbaths. Understood? You see, Luke 6 verse 1, one Sabbath Jesus was going through the grain fields. Then, verse 6, on another Sabbath he went to the synagogue. So look at this. Matthew and Mark, Mark and Luke are presenting it as happening on two different days. Matthew presenting it as happening on the same day. Okay, so how do we actually bring these two together? How do we try to reconcile these two things? That's my question. But again, Luke clearly says on another Sabbath. So, does Matthew clearly say that these things happen on one day? No. Going from that place, he went into the synagogue. But that's all what he says. So, when I try to reconcile these two or three passages, like Mark and Luke are saying the same thing, which happens on two different days. Matthew doesn't mention two different days. So, what I am trying to say here is, on one Sabbath, the disciples were going away from the synagogue to their homes. And that is where the field incident happens. Okay? And then the next week when they come into the synagogue and the next event happens in the synagogue. Like on day 1 and 8. Let's keep day 1 and 8. The 7-day gap. Okay? Day 1, after the synagogue, they go back. The field incident takes place. And they go back. And then on day 8, they come back to the synagogue and the next event happens. So this actually happened on two different events. So Matthew 12 verse 1 to 8. Okay, Matthew does not say that these people were going to the synagogue and this is when it happened. Does Matthew say that? No. Matthew says on the Sabbath it happened. And the same thing is what is happening in the other Gospels too. They were going through the fields on the Sabbath. It doesn't say that they were going to the synagogue. Okay? When did they going to the synagogue happen according to Mark and Luke? Next week. So, what I understand is that on the first Sabbath, these people are going away from the synagogue to their homes and this field incident happened. The next week, they all came to the synagogue again and here the second incident happens. Okay. Now, at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. What were the disciples doing? Okay, okay. Mark says they began to pick some heads of the grain. Why does it? Why do they do that? Because Matthew 12 verse 1 says the disciples were hungry. So Mark doesn't say about the hunger. Matthew says about the hunger. Okay. So the disciples came and ate. They were hungry. They ate. Well, the next thing that we see is that the Pharisees saw this and they say to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath." What is so unlawful in eating something? The disciples are hungry. They took the grains. They ate. What is unlawful in that? What law are these guys referring to? That's what we might ask. I mean, such a simple thing when you guys don't even want these guys to eat. I mean, this is the question that I'm asking you guys. So to understand that, Luke 6. Okay, now remember this. Mark tells the disciples ate. Matthew says the disciples were hungry and they ate. Luke says the disciples. Okay, Luke doesn't talk about the hunger. Luke says the disciples began to pick some heads of grain, rub them in their hands, and eat the kernels. This rubbing thing is not mentioned in Matthew and Mark. See, this is why synoptic gospels need to be studied like this. Luke says they rubbed. This rubbing is what irritated the Pharisees. Without rubbing, if they ate, probably they would have been okay. But according to them, even rubbing is not allowed on a Sabbath. This grain thing, no? You can't rub and eat. You can eat it otherwise. See how minute details are being put. This is why Jesus said, all who you are weak and heavy laden, come to me and I'll give you rest. You don't have to worry about these things if you're following me. If you're following man-made religions, you'll have to worry about how many buttons do you have, how much of facial hair do you have, what sort of jeans do you wear, or what sort of hairstyle do you have. I mean, decent is okay, not freakish hairstyle and all that. But okay, this rubbing thing is what irritated them. So they don't care about the hunger of the disciples. The Pharisees don't care about the disciples being hungry. All what they care about is their laws being violated. They don't care about the hunger. Whether the disciples have food or not, they don't matter. Their laws are violated. That's dangerous. This is a very dangerous position here. So, what is the problem here? Their laws are violated. Their unwritten laws are violated. Where in the Bible does it say that on the Sabbath, if you rub this, you are sinning? Where in the Bible does it say that? Nowhere in the Old Testament is that being mentioned. Right? So, what answer did Jesus give? Okay, so let's read what Matthew has to say about that, verse 3 and 4. So, if you're looking at Mark and Luke, one common answer that is coming in all three Gospels is about David. Right? Okay. Mark 3, isn't it? Yes, Mark 3. Mark 2 actually. Mark 2 and verse 25 and 26. Okay. So, one of you can read Matthew 12 verse 3 and 4. I'll read Mark 2 verse 25 and 26. Badal can read 6 verse, Luke 6 verse 3 and 4. Okay. Okay. So, Rentu, read. Okay. So we have a few verses after that, but I'll make you read it afterwards. Mark, okay. one line. Okay, verse 25 is what is kind of same to what Rintu just read right now. I'll just read. Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need in the days of Abiathar the high priest? Now, this is an extra detail that Mark tells. In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions. Now, Badal, what do you read in verse 3 and 4? Okay. Now, okay. Now, in Mark, you would have seen Abiathar the high priest, right? But if you're looking at the incident that happened in 1 Samuel chapter 21, okay, if you look over there, the priest's name was Abimelech, Ahimelech, and in chapter 22, Saul killed these priests, okay, but Ahimelech's son Abiathar escaped and fled to join David. Okay. Now, who exactly is Abiathar? Abiathar is actually the of the descendants of Eli. I'll just give you a family tree. Just give me a moment. First Samuel. Now, just because we are dealing with this, we just need to know what's the detail in here. See, First Samuel chapter 4 and verse 21. Okay, Eli had two sons, right? Hophni and Phinehas. Phinehas's Phinehas' son was Ichabod. Okay, huh? 421. Yeah. So Ichabod was the son of Phinehas. So Eli, Hophni, Phinehas. Okay. Now, as we keep moving forward in the book of First Samuel, there is one more line that I just want you to look. Okay. Um, I want you guys to just check out for a name Ahitub. Ahitub in First Samuel. No, Ahitophel. Ahitub. Which one? 22:11. First Samuel 22:11. No, before that. Before that. Ahitub. Ahitub. Yeah. Ahitub. Yeah, but before that, anywhere before that? Yes, I know, but before 20 to 11, is there any other reference? Huh? Not that chapter, man. Before that. You're still sitting on chapter 22, man. I'm telling you, go behind. Yes. 14:3. Yeah, good. That's what I'm trying to say. See here. Ichabod's brother, Ahitub. So Eli, Phinehas, Ichabod, and Ahitub. Ahitub's son Ahimelech. Ahimelech's son Abiathar. So Abiathar is the great great grandson of Eli the priest. Okay, thanks. Thanks. 14 verse 3. Okay. So, uh, coming back to First Samuel 22, Ahimelech, the son of Ahitub, right? Right? Okay. So, Ahimelech is a title actually. Ahimelech is not a proper name. Ahimelech is a title. The title of the guy whose name is Ahijah. Ahijah's son is Abiathar. Yeah. So, the point that I'm trying to make is at the time, okay, yeah, yeah. At the time that I am, at the time that David ate this bread, Ahijah was the high priest. Abiathar came later, but Abiathar became the priest. So Abiathar was alive. That's the whole point of this incident. Okay. Now, at that time, what did David do? He ate the bread that was in the presence. And for whom was that bread? It was for the priests. The priests. Okay, the bread was for the priests. So, where in the Old Testament do you see that as a law? It's somewhere in Leviticus, right? Okay, which chapter of Leviticus? So let's get familiar with the Old Testament quite well, because you don't understand the new without the old. Yeah. Leviticus 24 and verse 5. Leviticus 24 verse 5 to 9. Take the finest flour and bake 12 loaves of bread, using 2 tenths of an ephah for each loaf. Arrange them in 2 stacks, 6 in each stack, on the table of pure gold before the Lord. By each stack put some pure incense as a memorial portion to represent the bread and to be a food offering presented before the Lord. This bread is to be set out before the Lord regularly, Sabbath after Sabbath. So, how long is one set of 12 breads supposed to be used? For 7 days. Sabbath after so after each Sabbath, the new set of bread must be put. Okay. On behalf of the Israelites as a lasting covenant, and it belongs to Aaron and his sons who are to eat it in the sanctuary area, because it is the most holy part of their perpetual share of the food offerings presented to the Lord. So one thing you should notice in here, it belongs to Aaron and his sons. Okay, so this is a written law about this bread. Now, what is happening in 1 Samuel chapter 21? 1 Samuel 21, a written law is being violated. So David went to the priest and asked for bread or whatever he has. The priest said, I don't have any ordinary bread. However, there is some consecrated bread here. So the priest here is willing to give those set of breads to David and his men. Okay. Provided the men have kept themselves from women. As in, if they haven't had physical relationship with women for a time, then they can eat the bread. And then David said, indeed, women have been kept from us, and as usual, whenever I set out, the men's bodies are holy, even on missions that are not holy. How much more today? So the priest gave him consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence, which had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. So, as I said, the day these breads are removed, new bread is replaced every Sabbath. So, a written law was made an exception for to satisfy the hunger of a person. Did you understand? What you read in Leviticus, what is that verse? Leviticus 24, right? 24 verse 5 to 9. That written law was, I wouldn't say it was violated. The priest here made an exception to that law by considering the hunger of the people and David. Okay, so the bread is anyways going to be thrown away. So might as well give it to them, because old bread, I mean, not stale bread. Okay, it was old and it had to be replaced by hot bread. So the old bread anyways was going to be thrown. So might as well let somebody have it and have their hunger. Okay. So what Jesus is trying to say is, in the Old Testament, a written law was made an exception for to accommodate the hungry people. Here, hunger is the issue. The disciples are hungry, they pluck the grains, they rub it, and they eat it. And this rubbing is what they had an issue with. Unlawful on the Sabbath. You can't have these things on a Sabbath. Jesus says, in the Old Testament, somebody actually bent the law to keep the written law, to satisfy a hunger. So if they are okay with that, if David didn't violate the law by eating that bread, then how come you are having a problem with some unwritten law being violated? ഈ എഴുതപ്പെടാത്തൊരു നിയമം ലംഘിക്കപ്പെടുന്നതിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എന്താ ഇത്ര ചൊറിച്ചില്? എഴുതപ്പെട്ട നിയമം ഒന്ന് കണ്ണടച്ചപ്പോഴത്തേക്ക് ആൾക്കാർക്ക് ഭക്ഷണം കിട്ടി. അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ എഴുതപ്പെടാത്ത നിയമത്തെ ഇങ്ങനെ പിടിച്ച് വാശി പിടിക്കുന്ന കാര്യമുണ്ട്. जो लिखा जब उसको तोड़ा तो किसी का कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. जब भूखा पेट भरता है तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं. जो कोई अलिखित नियम कोई उल्लंघन करता है तो उसमें आपका प्रॉब्लम क्या है? जो लिखा नहीं है उसके फिक्र क्या क्यों करता है? That's the question being asked in here. So this is one thing which they should understand. Okay, they are so passionate about written laws, unwritten laws, that they don't care about the hunger. Isn't that something which we also do? Suppose I keep saying this thing. Suppose a person does not have the money to afford a formal pants and shirt. So he has to come with ordinary jeans and ordinary looking t-shirt. And I say to that person, and that person might be unemployed also, okay, doesn't have income. Without knowing what his real need is, he needs a job, he needs money. Without knowing that, I say to him, you must wear a decent shirt and come to church. Yeah. I'm coming to that. So these people are not even considering the hunger of these people. Second, as Badal said, the Old Testament gives permission for poor people to do that. Okay, Leviticus, right? Leviticus. Yeah, Leviticus and Deuteronomy. So Leviticus 19 and verse 9. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Verse 10. So, which chapter is that? Deuteronomy. Okay. Yeah. Please read it. Yeah. Yeah. So you can take with your hand, not with a sickle. So the permission is so these Pharisees don't see the part of the law that permits these people to have. No, they are poor, right? Like Matthew abandoned his government job. Peter and John and Andrew and James and all, they left their family jobs. They don't have income. So when they are going to church, synagogue, or coming back, they don't have enough money that they had earlier. So now they have to depend on someone else's mercy. So the written law gives them permission. The written law is also bent to satisfy hunger. But all what the Pharisees care about are unwritten laws being disobeyed. This is their problem. And talking about written laws, okay, as Badal said, they have the permission and they are going along with that. And then the unwritten laws are a problem. But there is one more thing that these people needed to remember. Okay, you see, if you are checking out Numbers, okay, I'll give you the reference right away. Wait. Yeah, Numbers chapter 28, verse 9 and 10. Can somebody read that? Yes.
The Sabbath day makes one offering of two lambs, a year old without defect. Together it is drink of offering and then offering of one week of an ephah
Ephah. Ephah.
of the
Finest.
finest flour mixed with olive oil. This is the burnt offering for every Sabbath in addition to the regular burnt offering and its drink offering.
Okay. Now keep this in mind as we come back to Matthew 12. Okay. Now, on the Sabbath, haven't you read on the law that the priests on Sabbath duty in the temple desecrated the Sabbath and are innocent? According to the Sabbath, everyone should rest from their works. But on the Sabbath, according to Numbers 28, verse 9 and 10, the priests are supposed to make an offering on the Sabbath every week. So if the priests are going into the temple, making an offering in the temple on the Sabbath, and if they are innocent, okay, why are you having a problem? Yeah. So you see, their focus is on the unwritten laws, which has no scriptural background. Whatever Jesus is answering them is only from scriptures. He talks about the incident of David's life. He talks about the Numbers 28, verse 9 and 10. Only scriptures he's talking. Others don't have any scriptures. Don't wear jeans. Where is the Bible reference for that? Wear modesty. I have Bible reference for that. Okay. This is the difference between Jesus and the Pharisees. And then Jesus tells to them, coming back to Matthew 12, verse 6, I tell you that something greater than the temple is here. You think you're saying temple. I'll tell you what is there something greater than the temple here. What is something greater than the temple? Jesus. Yes. Now verse 7. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Now that is quoted from Hosea 6 verse 6. Hosea 6 verse 6 says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Now what does that mean? See, when are people sacrificing? When they know that they have sinned. Okay. On the other hand, mercy is a lifestyle that shows compassion towards fellow beings. Showing compassion to fellow beings is what God looks for, rather than sinning and doing a sacrifice. Understood? Showing compassion and love to fellow beings is what God is more pleased with than doing a sin and then sacrificing. Yeah. Because these people are doing sacrifice, but still they don't have compassion to anyone. That's the problem with them. So these people have no compassion on people. They only love laws. Okay. The law was not made for, man was not made for the law. The law was made for man. Okay. Most of the time we also behave like this. We also behave in a way like this where people exist to obey the law. No, that's not it is. That's not how it is. Law exists for people. That's what we should remember all the time. Okay, law exists for people. And Jesus continues in saying this. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would have not condemned the innocent. If you knew what God would prioritize, as in showing compassion to others. So the people whose fields from which these disciples are eating, they are showing compassion to the disciples. And Jesus is okay with them, so he's also showing compassion. If you knew the compassion behind these things, then you wouldn't have looked at these disciples as though they violated the law. Understood? Okay, I'll repeat. If you saw the compassion that they showed, the people who are owning the fields, Jesus who is with them, if they saw the compassion that Jesus is displaying, then they would have not condemned the disciples for eating this, because they should be caring about the hunger of the disciples rather than the laws that they are trying to follow. And then Jesus says, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Okay, what does that mean here? What does that mean? The Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. And by the way, the Sabbath is not made for man. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. After man was created, Sabbath was given. Not Sabbath first and then man. Alright? So, Jesus, when he's saying the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath, Jesus says to them, to the Pharisees, you guys don't get to decide what should be done on the Sabbath, what should not be done on the Sabbath. Who is the Lord, the authority of the Sabbath? The Son of Man. Who is? Jesus. God is the one who decides what should be done on a Sabbath, what should not be done on a Sabbath. When man takes over that, God doesn't tolerate it. Okay? This is what Jesus says in here. So, 1 week has gone by. And the next week, Jesus goes into the synagogue. So, as I told you, this is happening in 2 different weeks. Okay? Now, Matthew and Mark say that in the synagogue there was a man with a shriveled hand. Okay? Shriveled hand. Now, if you're looking at Luke chapter 6, verse 6, Luke is a doctor. So, doctors are always specific. Okay? Luke 6, verse 6, what does it say? Which hand was shriveled? Right hand. I mean, when we say it about somebody, he broke his hand. But what when the doctor writes the prescription, what is happening? Right hand is broken. That's the difference in how Luke writes it. He's much more specific when it comes to medical matters. He's a doctor. So his right hand was shriveled. Now the Pharisees here, okay, the attendees in the synagogue, they are all coming to worship God and read His word, pray to God, and all that. So what are they coming to do here? Look at verse 10. Look at verse 10. 12 verse 10. Matthew. Okay, so they don't care about the health that this man needs. These synagogue attendees don't care about the health that this man needs. All what they care about is what accusation we might bring against Jesus. They only want to put Jesus in trouble. That's all what they want to do. Okay? Now look at Mark. Mark 3. Verse 2. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched closely to see if he would heal him on a Sabbath. They are not delighting in the healing of the man. See, this is the normal behavior of Pharisaic religion. They don't care about the happiness that a man needs. They only care about their own happiness. Now, who are these people who are looking for reason to accuse Jesus? 6 verse 7 of Luke, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. That's more specific. The Pharisees are the ones. The teachers of the law are coming and looking at, they are supposed to be looking at God. They're looking at trying to get Jesus, make a problem. Okay? So, they asked Jesus, is it lawful to heal on a Sabbath? So, what Jesus said to this man, stand up in front of everyone. Okay, so Jesus asked them in verse 4 of chapter 3 of Mark, which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do God, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? So this is the question that Jesus asked, according to Mark. Okay, so on the Sabbath, what is the law that God gave? Do not do any of your work on the Sabbath, meaning whatever you do for a livelihood, don't do that on the Sabbath. That's what the law gave. But these people have made so many extra biblical, unbiblical laws which people are so burdened about it. എവിടെ തിരിഞ്ഞാലും എന്ത് ചെയ്താലും കുറ്റം. Whatever you do, wherever you go, people will find fault. Okay? Even if it is a good thing, people will find fault. That's such a environment is so suffocating to live in. Okay? Now, what is it? Wait, which is lawful on a Sabbath? To do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they remain silent. You know why? It's not because they didn't know. They know the answer to that. But if they say any answer, they will be defeated. Okay, now Matthew says one more thing here. One more thing. Verse 11, 12 verse 11. If any one of you has a sheep and it falls in a pit on a Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? Yes. Why? Because sheep are personal property of families. Suppose your car is damaged on a Sabbath or on a Sunday. Would you wait till Monday to get it repaired? Suppose your child is not keeping well on a Sunday. Would you wait till Monday to hospitalize the child? No, because you care for the child, right? You care for your car. See, sheep is family property. I mean, in our areas or in today's India, you would find stray dogs and stray cats and animals roaming around the streets, on the roads. But in those times in the land of Israel, every domestic animal is a property of some home. Understood? Every domestic animal was a property of some home. And so, when a person who lives on animal husbandry, as in when a person is living on sheep milk and wool business and all that, sheep is a very important part of society. And so such an income generating thing, if that sheep falls into a pit on a Sabbath, no person will wait after the Sabbath is over to rescue it. It will rescue. So if these people will care for an animal on a Sabbath, then how much more valuable is a human being? This is plain logic, because man was created to rule over animals, and if animals have that much value, man should have more value. Okay? So it is lawful to do good on a Sabbath. And then Jesus told this man, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out and he was completely restored. So which means that he was not born with this issue. He became like this at a point of time. Okay, it was restored. And so what happened? The Pharisees are not happy with the man being healed. The Pharisees are not happy with Jesus healing the man. So what are the Pharisees trying to do? Verse 14. The Pharisees went out and plotted. Oh, he went out from where? Went out from the synagogue. They have come in the synagogue to worship, to praise, to study God's word and all that. They saw this, and from the place where they are learning about God's word, they go out, and that the next thing they do is to plan to kill Jesus. How they can kill Jesus? Okay, so Luke says in 6 verse 11, the Pharisees and the law, the teachers of the law, were furious, angry at a person being healed. They are angry at a person's hunger being removed. They are angry at a person being healed. So they are angry for the good for all the good things. Okay, and they began to discuss with one another what they might do to Jesus. So my next question is coming in Mark 3 verse 6. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians on how they might kill Jesus. Now, think about this. The Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they are of one group. Okay. Now, the Pharisees, as I told you, they are a group that existed in the time of Jesus, and they existed as religious leaders. So we know why they have an anger to Jesus. Now, why would Herodians want to kill Jesus? What did Jesus do to Herod and his people that Herod would want to kill Jesus? That Herod's people would want to kill Jesus? Okay, Herod Antipas was the guy that we are talking about. Herod Antipas is the guy who was responsible for the killing of John the Baptist. And since John proclaimed about Jesus, and since Jesus endorsed John and publicly testified that among all those who are born of women, there is no one greater than John. Jesus said that, and so Jesus also started speaking against the sins that Herod and his people were involved in. And besides, Jesus called Herod one thing. Okay, Luke chapter 13. Luke 13 verse 31. Okay. Now, Herod wants to kill Jesus because Jesus is preceded by John the Baptist. Now, what did Jesus call him? Look at verse 32. No, Lombdi. കുറുക്കനോട് പറയണം. He's calling Herod the fox openly. Okay. So, Jesus has now made enemies of the Herodians also. And if you look at Mark chapter 12, you remember the temptation of, or the question where Jesus is asked regarding paying taxes to Caesar, no? Mark 12 verse 13. The incident where they come and ask Jesus on paying taxes to Caesar. That part. Who came and asked? Verse 13. They sent some of the Pharisees and the Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. Okay. Now, so these two work together. Now, the Pharisees are looking for a political Messiah who would redeem Israel from the government of the Romans. From the Roman Empire, a Messiah would come and deliver them. This is what the Pharisees expected. The Herodians were a group of people who supported the Roman Empire. Understood? The Herodians supported the Roman Empire. The Pharisees hated the Roman Empire. So, technically, these two groups can't get along because of their different attitude towards Romans. But they are getting along because they have one attitude towards Jesus. So, they both are enemies. The Pharisees and the Herodians are enemies because of their issues with the Roman government. Okay? But the Pharisees have Jesus as their enemy, the Herodians have Jesus as their enemy. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Understood? The Pharisees and the Herodians think that Jesus is their common enemy, so we have to be one to kill Jesus. After that, we will fight. Understood? Have you guys seen the Royal Rumble in WWE? In that, every man for himself. That's the rule, right? So, all these people want a chance to be in the main event of WrestleMania, and so they will do whatever they can to eliminate the competition. So, it means those who are enemies will work together to throw out the biggest guy in the ring. Correct? That's how it happens. Alright, so this is the issue here. The Pharisees are not happy with somebody's hunger being removed. The Pharisees are not happy with somebody being healed from a problem because the person who is healed knows the pain of the issue that he is having. Pharisees don't understand that pain. All what they cared for is their rules, nothing else. And when Jesus opposes that, they hate Jesus and they are okay with tolerating their own enemy, joining with their own enemy to eliminate Jesus. This is how hard-heartedness can be. Okay, so we'll talk about this a little more in detail after 10 more minutes. 10 minutes. We'll take a break. Okay.